On staying at the table.
My dear friend, I watched a man leave a gathering last evening just as the conversation had begun to deepen. He had been polite, present, even charming in the early hours. But the moment a silence settled over the table, the moment the talk turned from pleasant to true, he reached for his coat. I do not blame him. That silence can feel like a small death. But I wonder what he missed. You and I have spoken of courage in its grander forms, the willingness to speak, to change, to cross into unknown country. But there is a quieter courage I want to commend to you today, one that requires no great speeches and no dramatic departures. It is the courage to stay, to remain at the table when every restless nerve in your body tells you to rise and go. Not out of duty, not out of guilt, but out of a deep and patient trust that something is still unfolding and you have not yet seen it all. I do not mean stubbornness. The mule stays, that is not virtue, that is the absence of imagination. I mean the deliberate choice to sit with what is happening, especially when it is slow or uncomfortable, or not yet what you hoped it would be. Think of how often you have abandoned a practice just before it would have taken root. Think of how many conversations you have ended one sentence before the one that mattered most. We are, all of us, extraordinary at leaving just before the bread comes out of the oven. The timing would be impressive if it were not so unfortunate. There is something almost comic about it if you step back far enough. We pray for depth and then bolt at the first silence. We long for meaning and then check our patience at the door like a coat we do not intend to wear. We want the fruit, but find the growing tedious. We want the view from the summit, but grow irritable on the path. I have done this more times than I can count, and I suspect you have too. What a peculiar species we are, forever starving at a table we keep leaving. And yet I find I cannot be angry at us for it. There is something tender in the way we keep searching, even when we do not yet know how to remain with what we find. Consider what actually happens when you stay. Not when you grip the chair out of obligation, white-knuckled and resentful, but when you soften into the longer rhythm of things. A friendship that has weathered its first real disagreement becomes something entirely different from the pleasant acquaintance it was before. It becomes a house with foundations instead of a tent pitched on fair-weather ground. A craft you have practiced past the point of early enthusiasm reveals rooms you did not know were there. Whole corridors of skill and understanding that simply do not exist in the first weeks of effort. Even grief, if you sit with it rather than racing to outrun it, will eventually shift. Not vanish, not dissolve into nothing, but shift. Like light moving across a wall through the course of an afternoon. You are still in the same room, but everything looks different. And you, having stayed, are different too. I think we leave the table because we confuse comfort with goodness. When something stops feeling easy, we assume it has stopped being right. But the most nourishing things in a life are rarely the most comfortable. The gardener's hands crack and roughen long before the first tomato ripens on the vine. The student's mind aches with what it cannot yet hold. The parent who sits up through the long night with a feverish child is not comfortable, not even slightly. But there is nowhere else they would rather be. Discomfort is not always a warning. Sometimes it is simply the feeling of expanding. And expansion, if you have ever watched bread rise, is never a tidy process. The dough tears, the shape is imperfect, and still something extraordinary is happening. There is also the matter of boredom, which I suspect drives more departures than fear ever has. Boredom whispers that you have already seen all there is to see, that nothing new remains, that the wise thing is to seek novelty elsewhere. Do not believe it. Boredom is almost always a failure of attention, not a failure of circumstance. The river you pass every day on your walk is never the same river. Its color changes with the sky. Its voice changes with the season, and the light that rests upon its surface at dawn is a thing so quiet and astonishing that I have sometimes stopped on the bridge and laughed at how many mornings I crossed it without looking down. The person sitting across from you at dinner is not the same person they were last year, or even last week, if you care to look closely enough. I have found that the world becomes inexhaustible precisely at the point where I stop demanding that it entertain me and start asking, gently, what I might have missed. Stay, too, with yourself. This may be the most difficult table of all. You know your own company so well that you have grown certain there is nothing left to discover. You catalogue your faults with expert precision and then wonder why the room feels small. But you are not a finished thing. You are not a document that has been read and filed. You are more like a forest. There are paths in you that you have never walked, clearings you have never rested in, whole seasons of yourself you have not yet witnessed. Sit with the version of you that is awkward and uncertain, the one who does not know how the evening will turn out. That version of you is not lesser. It is simply the one doing the actual living, which is messier and more beautiful than the polished portrait you carry in your mind. I want to tell you something that I have learned slowly and at some cost. The sweetest moments of my life did not arrive when I expected them. They came late. They came after I had nearly stood up, after I had already rehearsed my excuse for leaving, after I had decided that nothing more was coming. And then, like a second wind on a long walk, like the unexpected warmth of late autumn sun through a window you forgot was there, something opened. A word was spoken that rearranged everything. A laugh broke through that made all the patient hours before it worth the staying. These moments cannot be summoned, and they cannot be scheduled. They can only be received, and only by those who are still in the room when they arrive. You will not always know when that moment is coming. That is precisely the point. If you could predict it, staying would require no courage at all, just good timing. But you cannot predict it, and so staying becomes an act of faith. Not blind faith, living faith. Faith in the richness of this very hour, which may be offering you more than you have yet been willing to receive. The table of your life is long, my friend. There are courses you have not yet tasted, silences that hold more than any speech you have ever heard. I know that some of what has been served has been bitter. I know there have been stretches where the room felt cold and the company sparse. But you are still here. Your chair is still warm. And the evening, I promise you, is not over. So do this for me, and for yourself. The next time you feel the urge to rise, to flee, to declare the gathering finished, pause. Pour another cup. Look across the table at whatever is there, whether it is joy or difficulty, or simply the quiet hum of an ordinary hour. And stay. Not forever, just a little longer than you think you can. You will be astonished at what arrives when you do.